Edition with Carol Lynn and Leon Harris. Weekdays on CNN.
Operation Allied Force, day 45, and NATO admits it mistakenly bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. The incident has sparked new debate as Beijing voices its outrage. Here in the United States, President Clinton is about to get a close-up view of tornado recovery efforts in Oklahoma. I'm Gene Randall in Washington. We're awaiting the start of the daily Pentagon briefing. Once it begins, we will go there live. In the meantime, here is the latest on the airstrikes against Yugoslavia. NATO says it mistakenly hit the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. It happened during one of the heaviest attacks yet against the Yugoslav capital. According to the Chinese news agency, 3 people died in the embassy. Because of the attack, the UN Security Council held an emergency session overnight, afterwards saying it was shocked and concerned. Russian President Boris Yeltsin called the embassy incident barbarous and inhuman. Yugoslavia called it a war crime. NATO says it deeply regrets the error. As might be expected, the bombing of the embassy dominated today's NATO briefing seen live here on CNN. John Radler is in Brussels. John?
Gene, deep regret from the Secretary General of NATO, Javier Solano. This, one of the highlights of today's briefing here at NATO headquarters, a briefing which focused on NATO's strike against the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, a strike which of course has provoked diplomatic outcry in some quarters, a strike NATO describes as a terrible accident. Here's some of what the Secretary General had to say.
North Atlantic Council wishes to express his deep regret for the tragic mistake of the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. I'd like to tell you that I've just spoken with the Chinese ambassador here in Brussels, and I have transmitted the regrets personally. The sincere sympathy and the condolences of all the countries, of all the members of the alliance, go to the victims, to their families, and the Chinese government.
And Gene, a few more points made by the Secretary General. There will be no let-up in NATO's 6.5-week air war against Yugoslavia. He says diplomatic channels remain open. He is optimistic of progress on the principles for settlement agreed to by the Western powers and Russia in Germany in recent days. He says NATO's 19 members have the same determination and solidarity today after the hit on the Chinese embassy as they had yesterday. And coming to the military briefing, which followed the Secretary General, there is still unresolved confusion here as to the whereabouts of what NATO says was the intended target of the bombs that hit the embassy. That target supposedly the Directorate for Supply and Procurement. And one final note from the military briefing, Gene, NATO now confirms that cluster bombs it aimed at a military airfield in the Yugoslav city of Niš on Friday missed their target and indeed hit a clinic and marketplace. John Radler, CNN at NATO headquarters, Brussels.
As might be expected, the Chinese embassy fiasco overshadows an earlier incident when NATO bombs went astray in the southern town of Niš. CNN's Brent Sattler has more on both of these accidents in this report, and we caution you, some of the material is very graphic.
The Yugoslav capital came under the heaviest series of attacks since the start of NATO's bombing campaign. The embassy of the People's Republic of China set ablaze. Some 30 resident staff were initially reported to be trapped inside the building. The strike on the embassy may further complicate NATO's air war and the search for peace. China has strongly opposed the attacks on Yugoslavia and is sympathetic to Belgrade's negotiating stand over Kosovo.
It looks like somebody wants to stop China to accept discussions in the Security Council next week about initiatives to stop war and to start negotiations.
Shortly after giving that interview, Lubisha Ristic was caught by another blast outside a hotel. He is deputy to the wife of President Slobodan Milosevic in the Yugoslav Party of the Left, the first ranking official to be seen injured by NATO strikes. Several hours of raids were aimed at a number of buildings. including the Hotel Yugoslavia, claimed by NATO to house an underground bunker complex used by the paramilitary leader and indicted war criminal Željko Ražnatović, better known as Arkan, who was visible during the air raids. NATO said it also targeted the army and police leadership. Belgrade's night of bombing followed a day of carnage in the southern city of Niš, after NATO admitted dropping a cluster bomb by mistake. It came when residents thought it was relatively safe, in the middle of the day. At the places of impact, there were scenes of panic and confusion. "My brother," cries this woman, "my sunshine, where are you?" People try to save themselves or their property. As they fought to save life on the ground, staff at the central hospital were helping put out fires in a car park next to the pathology clinic. They said it put extra strain on doctors and nurses treating the wounded. Inside the hospital, some of the reported dozens of bomb victims, many with serious shrapnel injuries and lost limbs. There were clear signs of the weapon, which disperses small but deadly fragments of metal over a wide area, and bomblets on the ground. Death remained in the open many hours later for the media to see. A man lay next to boxes of broken eggs. In another part of Niš, further destruction to residential property from what appeared to be a more conventional type of bomb, reportedly dropped overnight. More civilian deaths and more civilian destruction, with NATO to blame, say officials here, using the circumstances surrounding another tragedy as their latest weapon in Belgrade's propaganda war with the West. Attacks which the Yugoslav authorities claim undermine the desires for peace. Brent Sadler, CNN, Niš, Yugoslavia.
A reminder, CNN's reporting from Yugoslavia is subject to conditions set by Yugoslav authorities. CNN must seek permission to videotape news events, and unrestricted travel outside Belgrade is not permitted. We're going to the Pentagon now for today's daily news briefing.
The spokesman to achieve a diplomatic solution to the crisis in Kosovo. Why we worked so hard last year and early this year to head off the use of force, first by the Yugoslavs against the Kosovo Albanians in Kosovo, and to find a diplomatic alternative to the use of force by NATO. There's no such thing as clean combat. We have the best pilots in the world, we have the best weapons in the world, we have the best planned missions, we have the best trained forces. But there is no way to avoid collateral damage or unintended consequences when weapons are employed to solve what might have been solved diplomatically. As NATO has said, we deeply regret the loss of life at the Chinese embassy last night in Belgrade. We did not target that building. The bombing was an error. It is currently under review by NATO, and when that review is complete, NATO will have more to say about what happened. I can't go beyond what NATO said, except to re-stress that this was a mistake. We deeply regret it, and we express our condolences to the Chinese for the diplomats who died and were injured in the attack. I think also it's worth stressing that this was not a fight that NATO sought. It was a fight that could have been avoided, but Mr. Milosevic decided not to avoid it. And now that we're in this conflict, it will continue until we achieve the political goals that the military campaign is designed to bring about. And those goals have been stated many times, is that the killing must stop in Kosovo, the Serb troops must come out, an international peacekeeping force with NATO at its core must go in, the refugees must return, and then they must be allowed to set up some sort of autonomous government. These are the 5 conditions that we've stated from the beginning. They remain the conditions that NATO is seeking to achieve. Let me talk a little bit about what did happen aside from the Chinese embassy in Belgrade last night. It was a very active night of attacks in downtown Belgrade against several significant new targets. General Wald will show you some footage of one of those we'll show you an image of one of those targets later on. One of the targets was the Hotel Yugoslavia, which, as you know, is the headquarters for a group that's known as Arkhan's Tigers. It could be more accurately called Arkhan's Thugs. It's a paramilitary group that was established in the early part of this decade by the interior police, the so-called MUP. And this group has been, Arkan himself and his group have been active in ethnic cleansing in Croatia and Bosnia. In fact, he's been indicted by the War Crimes Tribunal for ethnic cleansing in Croatia. He's on the list of most wanted, Interpol's list of most wanted criminals in the world. He has a long record of criminality, and we have reports that his group of thugs has been active in Kosovo, where and probably involved in some of the ethnic cleansing or executions that we detailed here yesterday. His group was associated with running a so-called rape hotel that forced Muslim women into prostitution in Brčko during the Bosnia conflict, and it's also been associated with a rape hotel in Peš in Kosovo, which we have talked about earlier. The Hotel Yugoslavia, which is in downtown Belgrade, is the headquarters of his group, and it's also a facility where the MUP works. It's a barracks for his paramilitary group and for the MUP. Even Yugoslav authorities, including President Milosevic, have blamed some of the atrocities in Kosovo on paramilitary groups. So there's no doubt that paramilitary groups, whether or not they were initially founded and sponsored by the state internal security operation, or whether they were founded on their own, have played a key role in some of the atrocities that have occurred in Kosovo. This was a key target because it is the command and control facility, the brains and nerve center of this paramilitary group, which has so long been associated with atrocities in the Balkans. NATO was determined to keep hitting at such targets. We are attacking simultaneously strategic targets in Belgrade, those targets that are at the heart of the military command and control system, as well as the paramilitary terrorist groups. And at the same time, NATO will continue to attack tactical targets on the ground in Kosovo, the types of troops that are responsible for the mass executions and for the depopulation that this map illustrates. With that, I'll take your questions. Charlie.
And what country dropped those bombs? Were the U.S. planes?
They were NATO aircraft. They were NATO weapons, I will say, not aircraft. They were NATO weapons. And that's all we're going to say right now. Yes,
well,
Martha.
Could I just ask, were U.S. planes among the planes? Were there planes from several countries involved in the attack on Belgrade, or was it just...
NATO is an alliance of 19 nations, and there are planes from many nations flying at any given time.
But you've said
Martha.
before, I'm sorry, when you said before, when this type of thing has happened, you said American planes involved in the strike on the train. Couldn't you, I mean, why not now? You said before.
This entire incident is under review, and I have nothing to say beyond that now. Martha.
Will there be any sort of a pause in Belgrade to figure out what went wrong? Might you target other areas because the buildings are so close together in Belgrade, and this could obviously happen again, I assume?
I don't anticipate there will be a pause. We are determined to continue with this campaign. We have said from the beginning that there are risks in any military campaign. One of those risks is obviously collateral damage. Another risk is that there's a possibility of mistakes. And this fell into the latter category of a mistake, which we deeply regret. But the fact of the matter is that Milosevic had a choice of avoiding this in the first place. He chose not to avoid it. NATO was determined to continue this campaign and to intensify the campaign. I think last night illustrated tangibly the type of intensification that's taking place. New targets going back at the electrical system while expanding to new targets that are close to the nerve center of the military command and control system that is responsible for what's happening in Kosovo. So I don't anticipate there'll be a pause. In fact, I see that there will be broadening attacks as NATO continues to work toward its goals.
But Ken, if they targeted the wrong building, is that correct? Then
the building was hit in error. We did not target the Chinese embassy.
But you thought it was something else. You actually aimed
Well,
at...
all of this is under review, and at the appropriate time when the review is complete, NATO will give an explanation.
Were these laser-guided bombs as opposed to satellite-guided bombs?
Well,
I mean, laser-guided bombs might be thrown off by smoke or that kind of thing.
As NATO said, these were precision munitions. Yes.
NATO appeared to also say this morning that the Directorate of Supply, I believe, and Procurement may have been the intended target. Is that correct?
That was the intended target, yes.
Where is that in relation to this building?
That's what NATO thought it was attacking.
And where is that building in relation to this?
We'll get into those details when the review is complete.
What you're saying is the pilot hit what he aimed at. He just aimed at the wrong thing.
What happened will come out when the review is complete.
But there's no implication. It implied that the weapon, there was a problem with the weapons or the guidance or anything like that.
I would not challenge your summary of what happened.
Several bombs hit the embassy, is that right?